I live in a converted garage. Yeah, you heard that right. A converted garage. And I haven't been this happy in a really long time. A lot of people would think that this is risky, that I moved into this garage, sight unseen, with a couple of pictures, not really knowing. And I didn't really think of it that way. So today we're going to talk about risks and how they can be relative.
Is it sex without a condom, like our health teacher told us, or is it staying in a relationship that we know isn't serving us? Is it traveling solo as a woman, or getting married and having children? Is it moving to another country for adventure, or moving to another state for your boyfriend's new job opportunity? What we don't realize is risk is always relative. And for those who have seen risky behavior in the past, they will either use it as a supportive character in their life story like I do, or as a sole reason on why not to try something. My mother didn't care that I was a girl. She allowed the same behavior with me as she did in my brother. In fact, I can't remember a time when my mother's vocabulary included the word should. Not for me, not for her, and not for my brother.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. If you don't know me, hi, my name is Dee Dee. I'm from the US and I moved to Portugal on a D7 visa.
Risk has always been part of my life. I really haven't been scared of it. And in fact, I look at it in a really positive way. I was too threatening to men that I dated in my past. As they complained and stayed in their job they hated, I changed jobs all the time. As they said that they were boxed in because they made too much, I was willing to take a pay cut if it meant that I had to work less hours or have less responsibility. And where I was open with my sexuality, they had repressed issues and I had no idea how to deal with them. So when people asked me about moving abroad alone, and wasn't I scared? Wasn't that a risky move? I thought that living a life that wasn't mine was the worst possible thing that I could do. I thought about my single mother organizing the camp gear each Thursday for our weekend camping trips in Michigan to get us out of the city limits and into an environment where we could swim in the river. And when I asked myself, why don't you just ask for what you want? All you want is quality time. I already knew it was the beginning of the end of us. I love him so much, but he doesn't want to spend his time with me. And staying would have been the riskiest thing I ever did in my life. So here's my moving abroad story. Take it as motivation, take it as a warning, or just as a silly story of someone else's life. But here goes. Not knowing where I would end up, and if Portugal would grant me a visa, might have seemed the riskiest behavior possible at the time. But I knew I had to move forward. During lockdown, I was elated to have more time with my life partner. No commute, less meetings, more time at home together, win-win-win. But through that time, I got more and more aware that I wasn't his first, second, or even third priority. In the past, I never asked for much, but I thought, well, when I do, he will adjust his schedule to accommodate me more. A gentle discussion bringing it up 6 months prior turned into an ultimatum at 1 year that turned into my realization I would never be a top priority. But in yet another plea to isolate ourselves and force more time together, we decided to celebrate the release of travel bans with pet sitting across the eastern US. On one isolated pet sit, we began discussing again my desire to spend more quality time together. And that conversation ended our relationship. We still had the awkwardness of him moving out, me continuing on with pet sits in other cities while he looked for apartments, and the disentanglement of a decade of love and living together. After he left, I never slept in the house again. I tried for 4 days and finally exhausted, booked myself into a motel. I knew the home I loved so much wasn't there anymore. For me, the riskiest thing would have been to stay in that house and try to make it a home again. It was never going to be a home without him. Instead, I applied for an anonymous job posting on Indeed and was interviewed and hired within a week. It didn't seem risky to me to apply to a job and give them all of my information without a company name. It didn't seem risky to me to give up my other job in hopes that this one will work out, but that would have seemed risky for others. I stayed in a hotel for a month, even though I couldn't afford it, and started to think about applying for a long-term residency in Portugal. I started the application process without the needed income or money in the bank account, but somehow knew I could get the extra $4,000 that was needed before submitting. I had no idea. I had never met anyone who had permanently moved abroad, but I somehow thought that I could do it. Most people would think that's risky. Not having all your ducks in a row before applying would be risky. Not knowing all the answers before jumping would be risky. It wasn't risky to me at all. What could I lose? I had already lost the love of my life and the home I loved so much. After 2 months, a hotel was outside of my budget, so I continued looking for pet sitting assignments and found one close to my home that was for 3 months. I then called property management companies and decided to rent my house until I knew what I was going to do with it. The $4,000 came from selling everything in my house that I owned. I knew I needed to go to New York City for my consulate interview, and so I finally found a pet sit and scheduled my in-person visa appointment that week. 10 hours after the interview, I flew to the UK for 5 months of pet sitting without knowing if I would ever be accepted or how long it would take for Portugal to give me a decision. After 110 days and 20 pet sits, I walked into my small studio apartment in Coimbra with a torn up backpack and a carry-on with only 3 wheels and a temporary visa in my hand. For many, it would have been all too much, but for me, risky is staying somewhere and trying to make you fit into a place you don't belong. Risky is staying quiet or not speaking up when it matters. Did I take risks? In my mind, the only risk I took was asking for more quality time and already knowing I wasn't going to get it. It was a feeling that made me vulnerable, and that was risky. I took that risk anyways, knowing what the answer was. So what do you know deep in your heart that is super risky, but you need to do in order to get into the next step of your life? Here's my advice for you. Do it.